Hey fellow bass anglers, did Dustin Connell really need the CrushCity Freeloader to win that recent event on Toledo Bend Reservoir? I think he didn't, and I think there's some lures that you can use that replace the latest and greatest, maybe some old trusty lures that you could break out that he could have won that event with in the same way that he won it. Stick around, we'll go back in time and pull out a bait from the past that Dustin could have used to win that same tournament, so that when the CrushCity Freeloader gets overplayed, you can pull something out and be successful with the technique. So there's no doubt that CrushCity Freeloader that Dustin used was a good lure. It's a unique lure. It's got a different style. The fish haven't seen it. But let's be honest, with forward-facing sonar, those fish in Toledo Bend that he was fishing didn't see a bait probably the whole winter and into their spring now. So those fish weren't pressured in that way. So I think there are different techniques that you could throw on them, and I think sometimes the new bait that pros are using kind of get overplayed, and then they're gonna for sure get overfished. But the unique part of that CrushCity Freeloader was its pintail design, and you'll see in the video of Dustin fishing that he was shaking that thing ferociously trying to get movement out of that tail. And here's where I think the pros have their baits that they're promoting, and they're on some fish that haven't seen lures before, and it's a bait scenario. And I really think there are some better lures that you could be using. And we're gonna break out and talk about one here today that's old school, that provides its own motion, and you don't need to be shaking it around like a wild man to get bait, and it'll hover and swim nicely above them, provide action, and then get bit on those bait fish as it's hovering over the top of their head. So let's get to it. This old school bait goes back in time. Everybody's used one. It's the Bass Pro Shop single tail grub in the ghost shad color. And we're gonna look at that, and it's fished in a couple of ways, so don't just bail right away. This ghost shad single tail grub is something you threw as a kid probably, and is as good now as it ever was. But you've got now a tool you didn't have back then in forward-facing sonar, so you can fish these fish that are unpressured, that are below bait, and you're trying to fool with a bait scenario. They've seen a ton of swim baits, they've seen Demiki rigs, they've seen all kinds of minnow-style baits, so sometimes moving back to something that's got the action of the single-tail grub tail is a smart play. And I rig it a couple of different ways. Of course, you're gonna throw it out there with the standard jig head, and I'll use a 1/10 ounce net head jig from a tungsten net head jig from Reaction Tackle. And that has a great fall. It's about that 3/32 ounce range, that 1/10, a little bit lighter maybe than a 3/32, but the 1/10 ounce, the 1/10 size from Reaction Tackle is a great one to just throw out there, let it drift down over the top of the school, and you can control it pretty good. So there's times when they'll eat it with the jig head. There's times when they won't touch it with the jig head, and in those cases, you can switch to the hover rig style. And then in that case, you're gonna go after a Gamakatsu 90-degree heavy wire round bend hook that is used in this hover style setup, so that I went in a little bit above a little bit down, about a 1/4 inch down from the top of the bait, and I went into the bait and came out, and I'm always going hook up, tail down on my twin tails. And then I'm going to use my Reaction Tackle nail weights. Again, they're tungsten nail weights, so they're very small, and I'm going to go in the head of that bait directly into the center of that bait. And I'm gonna press it in and push it all the way in, and I'm gonna grab the J of the hook, and I'm gonna push it in parallel to the hook, but past the nose, so that that whole weight is inside and under the hook. And then that thing doesn't have the jig head on it, and with the vertical line tie, that 90-degree Gamakatsu hook, this thing will fall straight down, and you can hover it over the top of the school. And the beauty of the tail is it's moving. You see the radical shaking action that Dustin Connell was using to trigger those fish to bite. This thing just subtly moves. This moves with the current. If minnows swim by this bait, this tail is moving from the motion of the water of them swimming by. So this tail is always moving, and you don't really need to shake it wildly to get bit. And sometimes it's more subtle than any other bait that you can throw out there. So the moral of the story is, I believe that Dustin Connell didn't need to use the CrushCity, Rapala CrushCity Freeloader soft bait, the new lure that they're trying to promote. I think he could have went to Bass Pro Shops and grabbed an XPS Ghost Shad 5-inch single tail grub and rigged it one of two ways, and he could have won the tournament the same way. So don't sleep on old baits. Always be looking for ways that you can mimic bait and maybe use lures that are away from the pack and different from the mainstream rush of popularity. And sometimes you got to go back in time to do it. Hope that tip was helpful. Please like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you next time on the water.